I'm here today with Kerry Connelly. Kerry's a writer, certified life coach, creator of the no-nonsense blog Jersey Girl Jesus, and host of the White on White podcast, which reimagines white identity apart from the dead end of pseudo-supremacy. Her latest book is Good White Racist, ? Confronting Your Role in Racial Injustice. Kerry just completed her MDiv at Christian Theological Seminary in Indianapolis, but she lives in New Jersey, same state as I am at, with her family. So Kerry, it's so wonderful to have you join us here.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here.
So Kerry and I have actually been together at a Writing for Your Life conference. She's one of the alums from one of our conferences. So appreciate that and have loved to see the progress that she's made as an author since that point in time.
Yes, quite a bit actually.
So maybe if you could just tell us a little bit about your journey, kind of what that's looked like as a writer for you. Yeah. And then we'll talk about your book.
Yeah. So, I've always wanted to be a writer, and I always kind of dreamed about writing the most delicious, beach novel, right? I wanted to write like that kind of like Secret Life of Bees kind of book, which I just think is just so beautiful. And I really suck at plot. So I realized that it was just not in my my skill set to write a beautiful, delicious novel. Maybe someday, maybe I'll be able to attend more writing conferences and learn how to do that, right? How to do that well. But what I did discover in some nonfiction classes in my undergrad was that I do much better in personal essay. And so I kind of started writing personal essay, and that's what got me started writing a blog. And I made a decision. I was working at a church part-time. And I remember very, very distinctly just making the decision, I'm just going to write. I'm just going to write and put it out there on a blog for free. Didn't matter if I was going to get paid for it or anything. And I did that for many, many, many years. And what was shocking to me, though, was that people started reading it and they actually came to me, even though it was mostly like my mom and two other people. But they would come to me and they would respond, and they actually seemed to be getting something out of my writing, which was kind of an amazing experience and surprising to me, because I would write no matter what, and then one day, very spur of the moment, I pitched to Pathos, and they decided to pick up my blog. And that's how Jersey Girl Jesus kind of got born. The blog Jersey Girl Jesus kind of got born. And it was there that I really started writing about racial issues and justice issues in general, women's issues, LGBTQ and racial issues. And it's crazy because on a website called Jersey Girl Jesus, I wrote a lot about Jesus, but the stuff that really got the hits and a lot of death threats and all of that fun stuff was stuff around racial justice and of course LGBTQ, and it was through that dedication to just writing and doing a lot of writing for free to very little money was how the book happened. Actually, that's what because Jessica actually reached out to me. The publisher actually reached out to me and said, hey, we would love to see a book proposal, which is every writer's dream. I mean, I never in a million years expected that to happen. So I feel really, really blessed and lucky that.
Well, that's really fantastic. The Jessica that Kerry's referring to is Jessica Miller Kelly from Westminster John Knox Books. And so, that speaks to Jessica's prowess, in finding good news sources.
And she's just an amazing, generous, incredible editor who absolutely made the work better. I mean, there's no way it would have been what it was or what it is without her. So.
Well, I'm not surprised, and I'm glad to hear, though. I mean, Jessica's been involved in, our Writing for Life and Publishing in Color conferences for many years. And it's just excellent to work with and has done a fantastic job with a lot of different authors. So
yes, I'm
really glad that that's worked out so well for you guys.
Yeah. It's been such a great relationship, and I'm really, really grateful to her. I write about her in my journal often just to being thankful for her, So, yeah.
So let me read a little blurb about Good White Racist. This is the product description. When it comes to race, most white Americans are obsessed with two things: defending our own inherent goodness and maintaining our own comfort levels. Too often this means white people assume that to be racist, one has to be openly hateful and willingly discriminatory, like a bad person. And we know we're good Christian people, right? But you don't have to be wearing a white hood or shouting racial epithets to be complicit in America's racist history and its ongoing systemic inequality. In Good White Racist, Kerry Connelly exposes the ways white people participate in, benefit from, and unknowingly perpetuate racism, despite their best good person intentions. Good White Racist unpacks the systems that maintain the status quo, keep white people comfortable and complicit, and perpetuate racism in the United States and elsewhere. Combining scholarly research with her trademark New Jersey snark, Connelly shows us that even though it may not be our fault or choice to participate in a racist system, we all do. And it's our responsibility to do something about it. Hallelujah. Couldn't agree with that more. Let me just read one other little endorsement here from one of our other author friends, Matthew Paul Turner. He writes this: "This book is a necessary read for all white people. Seriously, all of us. Good White Racist is a provocative, eye-opening, offensive, and powerful, and it will humble even the most progressively aware white person. Connelly's approach is self-reflective, sharp-witted, and thoughtfully researched. I needed this book. You do too." So I think that's a wonderful endorsement. If anybody knows Matthew, you know that he just doesn't say things to be saying things.
Yeah,
He
I love
says
Matthew.
what he says, he really, really believes. And so Kerry, that's just a wonderful endorsement. And I'm so glad you wrote that book.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. And I feel really privileged to have been able to speak into such an important topic of our time. I never in a million years, when I thought about being a writer, never did I think that my book would be released during a global pandemic. And then, just a few months after its release, would we find ourselves in one of the most critical racial crises in our nation's history in a long time, so I'm humbled by the fact that I get to speak into that a little bit.
Sure. Well, I should have mentioned this earlier. Kerry's book came out March 17th of 2020. Mm-hmm. So before, the George Floyd and the other issues that came up in the summer of 2020, mm-hmm. and right about the time when the pandemic was just hitting in full force and we were closing everything down.
Yep.
So what a time to do a book launch, huh?
Yeah, exactly. And in many ways, though, it ended up being pretty amazing, because although I wasn't able to go out and do the typical book tour kind of thing, what I have ended up doing have been multiple. I mean, I don't know. I've maybe done at least 50 book club drop-ins, and one of them, I think this is my favorite one. It was a group of people that did not know each other. They came from all over the country. Somebody organized a whole bunch of people that she knew, and they just got together to discuss this book. They weren't a member of a church or something, like many of them have been members of church groups and stuff like that. But this was just a group of people that formed a Facebook group during the pandemic to read this book and get together every week on Facebook and discuss it. And then they continued. They're still in a Facebook group. They have reunions every month where they get back on Zoom and they talk and they discuss racial issues. And it's pretty cool to see that happening and to see white people really engaging in the work in that way.
Now, do you know, are they open to new members?
That I don't know. I'll have to find out. I can find out.
Yeah. That might be interesting. If they are, I'd like to help them get the word out. But
yeah, for sure. I'll find out.
Now, one of the things that Kerry does also is basically consulting with churches and other groups to try to help them deal with these difficult issues. Mm-hmm. So could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So what happened is, for those who don't know, WJK is a Presbyterian publisher, and we did a webinar I can't remember when we did it, but we did a webinar, I think over the summer, and something like 2,000 people registered for this webinar and 1,400 people showed up live. And it was really amazing because I think what happens when white people specifically, and especially white people in leadership, when we are finally willing to confront the fullness of the problem of racism, and its entangled holistic nature, like the way it's just ubiquitous, it's everywhere, right? When we finally are willing to recognize that, the first thing that happens is we say, well, what do we do? What do we do? And that's a very important question. And it's also a very white question, right? Because I think that because of our identity as Americans in a capitalistic society, that is very focused on productivity, we just kind of go, okay, well, what do I need to do to not be racist anymore? Tell me what to do to not be racist anymore, and I will do it. Check the box, be done. And unfortunately, and maybe not unfortunately, but that's not the way anti-racism really works, right? Anti-racism is a state of being. It's an existential reality. It's not something that you do once and be done. It's not an end goal. It's a long haul game, a lifelong way of being and operating in the world. And so one of the things that I try to do is when I work with churches, I help them kind of understand and examine ways in which they may have been aligning themselves with empire, aligning themselves with supremacy culture, whether consciously or unconsciously, through all of their operations, liturgy, for everything from preaching and liturgy, worship, to pastoral care, to marketing, to even their buildings and grounds. How many white Jesuses do they have hung up around the room, right? And that people find very meaningful. And that you would be surprised at the amount of pushback that churches get when they start saying, you know what, we're going to cover up the white Jesus, right? We need to start representing Jesus a little bit, maybe more realistically, or a little bit more diversely, right? And that one thing triggers so much response and so much whiteness in the congregations, right? So helping churches to navigate that and to be prepared for it. That's part of the work of what I do with consulting.
Wow. So if people want to hear more about that or engage with you, they can just go to kerryconnelly.com, right?
Yep. That's the best way to reach out to me. They can schedule a quick info call with me and just get connected.
And the spelling is KerryConnelly.
Yes.
.com.
Yep. Like my Irish friends love to tell me it's because I'm named after the county in Ireland that my grandmother was from. And my
really?
my Irish friends always that's like being named New Jersey. I'm like, I know.
Well, what can you say? It made sense.
Yeah, exactly.
So let's get back to the book a little bit. Can you just talk a little bit about the structure of the book, kind of how it's organized?
So really what the book was originally, what I wanted to write was a liberating white theology. Now, that in itself is a controversial term because a lot of people will say, well, why do white people need a liberating theology? And I really felt that urge in response to something that Ruby Sales said in an episode of On Being, where she said, I know that we have a Black liberating theology, but where is the white liberating theology? And then I had an opportunity to actually meet Ruby Sales, who is, for those who don't know, she's a womanist theologian, public theologian, and activist. And when she was 17 years old, a white man approached her with a shotgun, and a young white seminarian threw himself in front of Ruby Sales and took that bullet and died instantly, which forever changed the trajectory of her life. And so I actually had a chance to meet her, and she literally took my hand in hers and stared into my eyes and said, white supremacy is murdering the souls of white people. It is flattening and homogenizing you, and it is soul murder. And that's what really got me thinking about a white liberating theology. What is this thing that white people need to be freed from? What is this thing in us that insists upon dominance and supremacy, or what I've come to call pseudo-supremacy, right? Because it's not really true that we are superior in any way. And so I like to try to draw attention to that. And in starting to do that work, and I was in seminary, so it was a pretty good time to think about liberating theology for white people. And when I started thinking about that, I realized that before I could even get to that, I had to understand whiteness first, right? And I had to understand where it came from and how did it become what it is, and how did this identity of dominance get so embedded in us, and as a culture, as a nation, and in our faith story. And so that's really how the book is organized. It's kind of takes us through a little bit of the background of how did our identity become. It's not so much about the history of racism. It's more about the history of white identity and the paradoxical nature of how we can be good people, and this idea of the good American, right? Because the Americans are always the good guys in our identity. And how can good people and a, quote, good nation actually be participating in something so horrific as systemic racism? So that's essentially what the book tries to explore. And we do that, I do that through looking at the history of education, history of some of the narratives that we have come to believe, like, oh, the Irish were slaves too, some of the justifications that we use, the criminal justice system. So I look at a number of different things in the book.
Very cool. This is very useful.
Yeah.
So without divulging anything that you can't talk about yet, what can you talk about in terms of what you're going to be doing next?
Yeah, I can talk about it because the contract is already signed. So that's good. Yay. So I have the immense pleasure and privilege of working with two amazing BIPOC writers, Josh Riddick and Brianna Clover, who are both consultants in their own right who work with churches and faith organizations for anti-racism work. And we are together writing a book that's tentatively called Wait, Is This Racist? A Be It Yourself Guide for churches and faith leaders. And it's essentially going to really speak to the church leader who wants to go through their operations and really kind of determine and understand how are they aligning themselves with empire. Like, are there hymns talking about Christian nationalism? Like, what are they doing, or are they aligned with the meek and the oppressed, right? So really kind of examining that, and then hopefully we'll build a course around that as well. So it's basically kind of taking my consulting work and putting it into book form so that churches can go through it themselves.
Well, that's excellent. Excellent.
Yeah.
I really am glad to hear about that. And you said it's due roughly when?
I think spring of 2022 rather. So I'm so used to saying 2020 because that's when the other one came out. But yeah, so March 2022.
Excellent. Well, let's please stay in touch, with the progress around that. And
absolutely.
I think there's several areas for us to collaborate on, given some of the other projects that I'm involved in too. So
I look forward to that, and I also am really, really jonesing for a writing conference. So I know I will be participating in the April, I think March, the March Writing for Your Life.
Yeah, we're still doing online conferences this year in 2022. I'm hoping that we'll be able to be back in person at a few different locations, and very much looking forward to that.
I can't wait. So.
Well, Kerry, thanks so much for the work that you've done. As I said, it's such a pleasure, to see someone who's one of our, conference alums do so well and about such an important topic. I'm thrilled that you've done the work to make that happen, and thrilled that you're carrying it on forward.
Oh, thank you so much. And I really appreciate the work that you do in bringing writers together, because that is also important work, because writing can get lonely sometimes. So I think it's really important that we all come together, and I've learned so much through the work that you've done as well. So thank you.
Well, thank you. It's always been my pleasure to do all this stuff.
Awesome.
All right. Thanks again, Kerry.
Thank you.